thank you very much. Morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the SPA Audit Risk and Assurance Committee on the 9th of May. The meeting is being live streamed, and I think that has now started. So we'll start with the standing items on the agenda. My name is Mary Pitcairn. I chair this committee, and we have with us Paul Eadie and Katrina Stewart, who are members of the SPA board. We'll also be joined shortly by Katharina Casper, who's having difficulties signing in, and we'll be joined for much of the meeting by Grant McRae, but he's not able to join us right at the beginning, so he'll join us as soon as he can. And we have people here from our auditors and from Police Scotland, and everybody's most welcome. Are there any declarations of interest? There's nothing I've been made aware of. No, okay, thank you very much. We have the minute of the meeting of the 17th of April for approval. Is everybody happy that this is a true record of that meeting? Yep, okay, thank you very much. And then we have the action, the minute of the, the action log as well, which has now decided to disappear. So I think there are a number of items recommended for closure here in the action log, and if everybody's happy with what is proposed. There's reference in the papers to a meeting to look at IBPD, and I would ask that, I'm very grateful for that offer of a meeting, but I would ask that we potentially look at whether or not we can do this, what it is the committee was looking for, perhaps other than by a visit, and we'll ask that officers from Police Scotland and the SPA discuss that and come back to us with a proposal. Is that okay? Okay, thank you very much then. In which case, we're moving on to a decision to take business in private. We have items 6 to 8 on the agenda today, and I would ask if members are comfortable that we take those items in private at the end of the meeting. Okay, thank you very much. The first substantive item on the agenda then is the internal audit update at item 2.1. And we have with us Claire Robertson from BDO. So I think I'll just hand over to you, Claire.
Thank you. So this is the results of our follow-up work in the quarter, and as a result of that work, we've been able to confirm that 17 of the recommendations are fully implemented and a further 21 partially implemented. You'll also see within this report that we're suggesting 11 are superseded, that we agree that these are no longer required, and most of those are due to them relating to a project that is no longer proceeding. 14 of the recommendations due for implementation were not yet implemented, will be followed up again next quarter. And the other thing to make you aware of is that we've not been able to review evidence in relation to forensics recommendations, and this was, I think, in part due to staff sickness, so we'll make sure to cover those in the next quarter to give a timely update there.
Thanks, Claire. John, did you wish to say anything on this report?
Thank you, Chair. Probably just picking up on Claire's last point on forensics. Apologies, Fiona Douglas can't make just the beginning of this meeting. However, that has just been an oversight on the part of forensics, partly exacerbated, like you say, because of staff sickness in that area. But we can give you our commitment that progress is being made. And we'll make sure for the next quarter's report that that's priority to follow up with BDO.
Thank you, that's very helpful. I was concerned to note that you hadn't had the information you needed, Claire, so if we have a commitment to get that to you quickly, that should enable us to cover that off. Any member got any questions or comments on this report? A very comprehensive update, Claire, for which we're grateful. Paul?
Yeah, can I just ask on page, where is it, 25 of the report, the the update from BDO, which makes reference in the last sentence to Police Scotland needing to make continued efforts to do this recommendation. This is about the skills gap and a skills matrix. Can I ask why is this not being implemented? Is it not being implemented or not being implemented just now? And why is this? Because I wouldn't have thought a skills matrix actually takes an awful lot of resource to complete. And also, is this not something that, you know, if you do a gap analysis, does that not actually save you money in the long run?
I think for this one, the recommendation had like multiple points. So it was about doing the skills gap analysis, but then also implementing training to kind of fill the gaps that were identified. We haven't agreed that this one is superseded, so we've included, or as implemented that's going to be, so we've left the status as not implemented because we think that it should be done, although notwithstanding that the prioritisation might mean that the date keeps being pushed back a little bit.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Hazel.
Thanks, Chair. Just to add a wee bit of additional context to that, I'm Hazel Irvin from Service Delivery within the Digital Division. And it's not that we're not implementing the skills gap, we are actually continuously evolving what our skills gap analysis process looks like. And we've actually got quite an extensive training programme as well in terms of the process, in terms of how we identify the training that we're requiring across the Digital Division. So that piece is very much in progress. Part of the kind of issue that we've got and the piece that we've kind of paused that and stopped at is really around the proper implementation of a full resource management solution, which will come at cost and required for additional kind of resources in terms of how we support the management of that. So this action in itself can encompass both of those elements. So definitely the skills gap analysis and the training records and the process that we've got in to support that is a piece of work that we've actually had for a number of years now, and we're continuously evolving and improving the processes that we've got in that space.
Thank you, Hazel. John, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thanks, Chair. For this paper, there are two recommendations that Police Scotland are proposing to close, which BDO don't agree with the management responses on, and there's a request that ARAC makes a decision on those. I think on reflection, we've looked at this and we think there's perhaps something that we could do in advance of these requests coming to ARAC between the SPA, Police Scotland and BDO. So we'd perhaps suggest, if you were agreeable to this, that we could take an action to agree a process in future so that we've got all the information available for you to make that decision, because as it stands, it's quite difficult for the committee, I think, to do that without further information.
Thank you very much, John. I absolutely agree. I don't think it's our role to try and sit at a meeting and arbitrate on these issues. It'd be much more helpful if they could be discussed in advance and hopefully agreed. So I'd be very happy for you to take that action away, and you can report back to us at that future meeting. That'd be really helpful. Does anybody want to come back in? No. Okay. Well, in which case, thank you very much for the report, Claire. Very comprehensive, and we can look forward to the resolution of these issues as John has suggested. So thank you. Our next item then is item 2.2, the Police Scotland Audit and Improvement Recommendation Tracker for Q4, and we have with us ACC Stuart Houston.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning everybody. The paper obviously presented at this agenda item covers the update Q4, January to March. And we'll just start off and give you some highlights of what we've got from that. And Donna Adam is on the call as well if there's anything further to assist with it. But there's 333 recommendations are still open across 50 individual publications. That's excluding anything new that comes from BDO from this meeting. We've had 53 new recommendations added in the last quarter. And there are quite a high number still that we're experiencing just now, probably just due to the sort of reflects the amount of scrutiny that we have. They're all relatively recent. I would say the recommendations, 59% have been added to the tracker within the last 6 months. which again is part of what we're working through. In the last quarter, out of 101 that were due, we closed 51, continuing to work on a small number of these due to closure, but we're experiencing a wee bit of a lag. There is quite a volume, and I think as maybe been highlighted, some of them are quite different parts to sit on one recommendation, which again makes it that wee bit more difficult to discharge them fully. There is we do recognise there is a bit of a challenge for us at the moment regarding some of the number of recommendations we have, and we have tried to bolster our team that we have looking at this, particularly some of the HMICS recommendations as well, and hopefully that'll start to take effect as we go through at least the next quarter. We might start to see a bit of a difference from that. Again, one of the things we've sort of touched on, I think, is about timescales, and I know it's been mentioned already about why that's not been closed in certain times. I think that is something that there are slight delays. It's making sure that we challenge sort of any different parts to recommendations and make sure that we're addressing them as much as we can. And we're trying to do a bit of work about reprioritising some of the activities at the moment to ensure there's a sort of balance against risk to the organisation from some of the more higher risk recommendations. Been quite a lot of work done in the last quarter as well in relation to looking at extensive reviews of historic or difficult to discharge, and we are having regular meetings with partners, including HMI, in relation to how we can look at these a bit differently and change our focus. I think there's a bit of work as well we've picked up on in deconflicting some of the recommendations, where we are seeing in different publications that sometimes they are slightly repeated, just in a different format, and that's one thing that we are having a close look at. We've also a bit of work internally about our governance structure regarding the recommendations, which we've been pushing through on, looking again, as I mentioned, about prioritising that. And sort of really to sort of recap at the end here, the bit about we're looking forward into the next quarter, updating the progress on some of these, and try to provide probably for this meeting about a level of detail about the three main sources of our scrutiny: HMI, internal audit, and independent reviews that are captured, whether that be ICO, biometrics commissioner, etc. So we are trying to give a wee bit of focus on the detail of the different, I suppose, areas that such recommendations are coming from. So the report is there. There's, as I say, if there's any sort of in-depth knowledge into it, Donna is on the line, who I'm sure could help with to support any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Any members got any comments or questions for Stuart or for Donna? I mean, I think I certainly welcome the new format of the report. It's much more focused, and I think you know, very much welcome that. But it is a bit like a hamster wheel, because you've got 51 closed and 53 new recommendations added, so the numbers don't change significantly. I think what we're keen to see, and I think we've said this before, is a focus on particularly the high risk recommendations, but also those that are out of date and need to be brought forward, brought back quickly. So I think your final comments, Stuart, are welcome. We'd like to see that being the focus of the next report, perhaps catch up on some of these. Anything anybody else wants to say on this? Nope. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. That's another update that we welcome at every quarter. And the next report is a similar report, but from the SPA. So we're over to you, John.
Thank you, Chair. Fairly straightforward report. This is our last update. We've managed to close 6 HMICS recommendations, which is good progress. And of the remaining 19 recommendations that the SPA has from all of the inspection bodies, there's just one area which is overdue. And actually, we believe that we've concluded the action now. We just haven't been able to close it off with BDO in time for this meeting. So good progress and no particular issues to highlight to the committee.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody have anything they want to ask John about this report? Nope. Okay, you're getting off lightly today, John. Thank you for that. So the next item of business, moving to section 3 of the agenda, and item 3.1 are we have internal audit reports on the grievance process the review of ICT general controls and best value readiness, so 3 separate audit reports. And I'm going to pass over to Claire to present these to us. Thank you.
Great. So the first report is on the grievance process. I think as part of this work, we could observe that there were a lot of steps being taken to improve the culture through the Creating a Positive Workplace programme, and things like manager training, further mediation support, and raising awareness of the support and services in place were in train. However, at the time of the audit, it was a bit early to assess the impact of these steps, given they were still being implemented. So at this stage, we've given limited assurance over the grievance process, control design and effectiveness. There were some important findings raised in this review. I would summarise those as being related to kind of record keeping, management of information, reporting. So there was no reporting on grievances, things like measuring early and effective resolution, analysis of themes and outcomes, any lessons learned, or compliance with timescales, no reporting on that. And our sample testing did find a lot of gaps in record keeping and non-compliance with timescales. There's also multiple methods used to maintain grievance records, like different trackers in place, and all of them had gaps in information, key dates not recorded, key pieces of information not recorded. We also noted that there's no formal channels in place for feedback or lessons learned on grievances. I think one of the key themes coming out of these recommendations, and one that we've seen in previous HR reviews that we've done as well, is the lack of a kind of modern HR system or case management system is definitely a limiting factor in terms of being able to deliver comprehensive and efficient controls in these areas. So we have raised that as an observation, but in the meantime, I've recommended a number of workaround controls to achieve better control in these areas, better records on grievances in the meantime. There is one recommendation in here that management have not accepted, and that's around making some changes to the procedure to include success criteria, reporting arrangements, and considering provision for SPA approval of the procedure. So that recommendation has not been accepted, but all the remaining recommendations have been.
Okay, thank you very much, Claire. Yep, very good report for us. And we do have Katie Miller here from People Development. And Katie, I wonder if you wanted to say something about the last point Claire made in relation to the recommendation that's not been accepted.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think in relation to data and systems, I'm fully accepting that. And as an organisation, there's a recognition that we do need to move forward with a case management system, and one that actually the functionality works. I think part of what I struggled with BDO is, on the one hand, they're asking for better information and data and sharing of information. However, the risk of that comes that we still maintain it in forms that probably aren't as secure as a case management system would be. So I'm pushing with digital at the moment for us just to procure a case management system. You know, that there are some very good systems on the market that we could just move ahead with and look at how we adopt that. So in some ways, I welcome the point around systems. I think the point around authority approving procedures actually is one that I don't agree with, or board or committees. Our procedures and our policies are subject to collective consultation with our recognised trade unions. And actually, it's at that point where we agree whether or not there's a collective agreement to a policy or not. I think that the role, if I may, for the boards and the committee is not the approval of the procedure or the policy itself, but it's the assurance of what has been agreed, and that you have that assurance. And then I think the only other point that I'd make is around the success criteria of a policy or a procedure. That's not a practice that I would have seen in any of the organisations that I've worked in kind of 25 years, particularly for something like grievance. And the reason for that is the success of a grievance will look very different to whoever the members are of that particular grievance. So I struggle with the wording of the BDO recommendation in there. That's not to say that we shouldn't be very clear on the purpose of a policy and a procedure. Absolutely, we should be. But that word of success criteria as I say, that looks very different for whoever is involved in the grievance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Katie. Claire, did you wish to come back?
I think on the success criteria thing, and maybe also oversight of the procedure, I think what we're kind of looking for is clear
outcomes.
I guess performance indicators, outcomes that have been bought into and are kind of monitored and reported, and for that to be documented somewhere as something that will be done. So you're making clear what things you will measure and where you will report that to, and there's effective oversight of that, so that at an oversight level, any kind of reporting, like the grievance reporting that used to happen to SPA, if that was to restart and be improved, it would be clear to the SPA like what was expected, what was delivered, and therefore whether or not this procedure is effective, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you, Claire. Katie?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm in agreement with that. So that oversight and what that should be, that the bit that we're not accepting is that success criteria are incorporated into a policy or procedure. So maybe it's just a wording here, but that's the demarcation for me.
Yeah. So with that explanation, Claire, would you be content to recognise that there is whatever risk this is intended to deal with has been mitigated?
Yeah, I think if that's documented in a different document to the one that we suggested, it would still mitigate the risk. So yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, does any board member wish to come in at this point? Any questions or comments? Katharina?
Yeah, just a comment from me. I mean, thank you very much, Claire, for the report, and thank you, Katie, for kind of providing the management side of the story. I think it's an incredibly important report. I think this is something that we have picked up. You know, that lack of visibility around some of the HR processes. We've certainly picked that up through a number of committees. We've been having conversations, and it was just like, okay, we understand we've got data on complaints, we have data on this, on legal cases, but what is happening with the grievance, what's happening with HR processes? So I think this is really a welcome report. It's really timely. It's good to hear that there is already work underway. Though appreciate that it was difficult to incorporate that into the audit. And I suppose my question is, so Katie, absolutely support the requirement of our case management system, because if it's not measured, it's not managed, sort of in my experience, so it would certainly solve a lot of things, and would make a lot of data more transparent. My question is, you've got, I think, September 2024 as kind of some of the completion dates in some of these actions. So I was just going to check as to how realistic you think that might be, that you will have scoped and potentially kind of gotten some systems in. I know that there's some off-the-shelf systems that can be introduced relatively quickly, but just so it's the time scale. So how realistic do you think that they are?
I would like us to be able to cut through this as an organisation, and and as you say, Katrina, there is that there's very good systems out there that you can buy off the shelf that would work through this. Some of the dependencies are, I think, around other aspects of the audit. So, for example, the investigatory pool, how we train up, specific members. And actually, we had a good discussion at Strategic Leadership Board yesterday on that, and whether or not we could find some additional budget where you have a dedicated pool of investigators. I've worked with that model in the past, but also within people in development, we move forward with a formal consultation on restructuring my team. So I've got some ideas there around specific case management and what that might look like. So there are some dependencies, but I would think September, I would like to see us have a good system. Yeah.
Okay, no, thank you for that. And Chair, I have got another question. May I come in?
Yes.
Yeah,
of course.
Thank you very much. And again, so this is to some degree related to the report, but actually is probably a slightly broader question to Claire or maybe to Katie as well. So, obviously the report kind of refers to the process that as many things as possible, the procedure is such that things will be picked up by the line manager in the first instance. And then if that's not resolved, then it's being taken to a more formal kind of process. Now, obviously, again, reflecting on kind of some of the previous grievance cases that were widely publicized in the media, etc., one of the criticisms has been that the things that should have been gone into a grievance process maybe don't go into a grievance process, at least historically, and or don't go as quickly, or not kind of sort of investigate as fulsomely as they should have been. So maybe just a sense check, I don't know, from Claire, from Katie, again, appreciate that it relates to historic practice, but your view just now in terms of the things that should be going to the grievance process. What is your sense? Are they going to the process in a timely fashion, and are all the things that should be dealt with, through a grievance process, are they all kind of being funneled through? Or do you feel that, like, how do you know, basically, do you get everything that needs to come in, and does it come in a timely fashion?
Katie.
Yeah, it's a very good question, isn't it? Because we only know what we know. I guess is where the question is coming from. We have within people in development what we call people direct. So that's the first line contact. And actually, for me, that's the majority of where the triage, if I can call it that, takes place. And as part of the review of people in development, it's looking at how I can strengthen that team so that actually you've got very qualified HR people that can make that determination about a triage, which may be that actually it's a procedure, but it may be, we've now got over 20 trained mediators in the organisation. It may be that they could triage into that route. So I personally think that we're getting a reasonable amount. In some ways, it's about having clarity for colleagues about what the channels are if they want to raise something. And actually thinking then the biggest bit for me is about the timing of the grievances. And that is coming back to resource and the fact that we're asking colleagues to investigate grievances that can be really complex in nature and multifaceted across, different procedures or policies. So it comes back to me about, whether or not as an organisation we invest in a trained investigatory pool. And actually then you have a very independent pool of people that are trained to undertake investigations. So there's a bit of me, and the chief has kind of asked for more detail on what that model might look like and what the cost would be. But there's something about building capacity for us. Procedurally, we're probably falling out of the timescales. But actually the impact on the colleagues, that's the biggest bit for me. We need to get on top of that and find ways to do that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Katie. Katharina, did you want to come back there?
No, I think it's a really good answer. Thank you so much for that, because I think, it's incredibly important from a cultural perspective as well. So it's not just the procedure, it's the cultural perspective. So I would really, certainly welcome kind of something as you've described, because the other, I've got another question that kind of relates to that as well, and that's, and again, apologies for pulling this out here, but actually this is longest standing questions that we've had in some of the other committees, because by the time if there is an allegation of, I suppose, conduct within a grievance, so again, some of those cases where the allegations are being made, it's taken through a formal grievance process, but actually there is potentially a handoff into PSD, and how that relationship work as well, between PD and PSD. I think that's a really interesting one that certainly with my kind of conduct and complaints hat on, I would quite like to get a better insight in as well in due course. So how does that linkage in those two kind of departments, what's happening in that space? And because at the moment it is a little bit of I'm not going to say a black box, but I don't think it is as visible to us as we would like. And Katie, I see you smiling. So
well, I'm actually smiling because myself and ACC Houston, who I know is on this call, have had conversations very much about how we can tighten that kind of landscape of what's happening across the organisation. Kind of where's your heat map of where we're seeing intelligence or insight or evidence that's pointing to a particular, kind of event, etc. So myself and ACC Houston have just taken through the new People Board terms of reference for what we're calling a case review panel. So that's a very tight panel, and we're happy to share the terms of reference with committee. Perhaps after this, that is subject to, we're speaking to the trade unions about the terms of reference at JNCC on the 22nd, but we're happy to share that, and hopefully that will give some very good assurance to this committee around how PSD and P&D are going to work together in this space.
Thank you very much for that, Katie. Claire, you had your hand up earlier, and possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you kind of covered most of it anyway, but on Katerina's original question on, I guess, whether we were finding that the right things were being kind of submitted at the right time, I would just draw attention to page, I think, 15 of item 3.1, which is finding 2 of that report. And we selected a sample of 15 grievance cases and went through in detail to understand whether any kind of evidence or information was passed on to the right place and assess the timescales and things. And there were just a lot of limitations in terms of what had been recorded on the systems that made it quite difficult to come to a definite conclusion on that. So yeah, I could go through it, but there's a lot in there. But just instances where it wasn't actually clear when the outcome was because the information was difficult to locate. Instances where it wasn't on the portal and when it should have been, or where there was no record of the dates of certain things. So it was very difficult to come to complete assurance, and like some of the recommendations around the record keeping, and certainly if there was a system, those things would be improved.
Yeah, I think the we wish you luck in your quest for a new system, Katie. It does sound as though it would solve a lot of the problems and make everybody's life a wee bit easier. So good luck with that. Is there anybody else wants to come back in this report? If not, thank you for the report on the grievance process, Claire. And the second audit report we have is a review of ICT general controls.
Yeah, so this general control review was quite a broad-ranging review that assessed only control design, but in a number of different IT domains. So quite broad coverage. And we've given moderate assurance, given the number of areas we looked at and the relatively low level of significant findings. We think it's a good result, shows good understanding of the risks and controls in this area amongst the team. The significant findings were relating to a lack of periodic user access reviews, so people could be retaining access to systems that they no longer need. Also, there are a number of legacy systems in place that kind of circumvent the usual controls around single sign-on and password complexity requirements. And we also noted that there's some limitations on patch management. So often if a patch is rolled out, it needs a device or a server restart to kind of fully get that patch effective, and that's not always being done in good time. So those are the most significant findings, but overall a good level of control design in the areas that we looked at, which were fairly broad.
Okay, thank you very much, Claire. It's another very helpful report. Does anybody have any questions or comments on it? We have Andrew Hendry here if you wanted to say anything from the management side, Andrew.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, everyone. I've also got Hazel Orange from my team who led in this space. I'll maybe transfer her for the main detail. But yeah, I mean, I think overall, I think the kind of audit outlines, if you like, I suppose, the kind of work that's being done and also what's still to be done. Legacy meeting new world is probably our main challenge in here. A lot of what we can and can't do is restricted by what we're having to maintain at the moment. But again, I think solid plans are kind of demonstrated there. But if it's okay, Chair, I'll maybe hand to Hazel just to provide some comment from the area because she led on the work. Thank you.
Yes, that'd be fine. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. So I think just first and foremost, actually, thanks to BDO just for the engagement throughout the full process in this. So obviously it's the first time we'd been working with BDO, and Claire, you'd mentioned there that it was quite a broad audit, and I think we had about over 20 interviews and over 70 different pieces of evidence were submitted to support the audit. So it was quite extensive in that effect. So lots of good kind of good practice has obviously been identified kind of throughout this, and the findings were findings that we aren't surprised about, and that we've got processes, projects, etc. already kind of in place to start to meet some of these needs and these requirements. So that was probably all I kind of really wanted to cover.
Thank you very much. I mean, that's really interesting as well from your perspective, Hazel. So thank you for that. Claire.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry, it's not Claire, it's John. sorry. It's John who's put his hand up.
Well, thank you, Chair. It's just really a final point here. Like I say, this is quite a good audit, and it was planned in this way. It's the first time that BDO have done an IT review, so they've done a fairly broad brush review with their own internal experts of all of our IT systems because they're so complex. And our proposal that you've already approved is that for the current year, we'll be able to look at a particular area with this knowledge from this audit to look at a particular area in a bit more detail, and that should allow us to have a conclusion on design and implementation as well as effectiveness. So there was a bit of a sequencing to this. This gave us the broader overview of IT, and then for the following couple of years, we'll be able to look at particular areas in a bit more detail.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I mean, all of these audits are very valuable, and we tend to focus at this committee on where you found a problem, and you know, we might have a bit of disagreement as to how to fix something or how to mitigate a risk. But we shouldn't ignore the fact that the audits often highlight really good practice as well. And so that's very valuable. And I'm sure those who are on the receiving end of the audit find that useful as well, to see that their good work is being recognised. So thank you again, Claire, for the report, and thanks, Hazel, for your comments. The third of the internal audits is on best value readiness. Back to you, Claire.
So as part of this work, we just took a look at the progress, I guess, being made against the best value readiness project. I guess we noted that a proposed approach to best value assurance had been kind of set out. There had been a new role, appointment of a head of best value to lead on this, and a pilot review had been completed as a proof of concept. So there was progress there, but consideration of the team structure and reporting lines had all been done, and there was like a kind of plan in place initially, but that plan had stalled. And at the time that we did this work, there was no real clear pathway on how the resource requirements that had been identified would be fulfilled. And the kind of project oversight on the status of it had been largely paused because the resources weren't really in place to do that. So I guess we looked at this project at a time where it was sort of partially paused, if you like. The recommendations we made are around, I guess, developing a new forward plan to reflect the realistic progress that could be made with the current resources, as well as the desired resource level and additional progress that could be made with that. We've also recommended kind of setting out a plan to secure the resource that's needed if it's decided that is approved and can go ahead. We've also recommended like further formalising governance process around the best value project to ensure there's enough monitoring in place to ensure delivery against the plan agreed. For example, management information on 2 accountable officers and relevant boards, and any delay of achieving milestones being discussed. And again, similarly, once the project is fully at the kind of business as usual operational delivery phase, regular reporting against the self-assessment work. We noted that there hadn't yet really been any reporting against the completion of the actions developed from the toolkit, and partially that was due to kind of training in how to use the action tracking system. That's another recommendation that we've made. We've also thought that given we're kind of going through initial pilots, it would be good to have analysis of the time it's taken that can be sort of tracked, and also some more guidance for those going through the kind of self-assessment to understand the tools that are available for them to use, such as EFQM, and what kind of methodology to use when you're undertaking a self-assessment, and some written kind of procedures to make it easier for them to understand what the expectation is. So quite a lot of recommendations in there, I guess, like just reflecting the stage that the project is at.
Yes, thank you, Claire. As you say, just reflecting the stage we're at here. We've got Alistair Corfield with us, and Alistair, I know you're primed to give us an update on this at the next in item 4 on our agenda. But is there anything you want to say at this stage in relation to the audit?
I'll be brief, just as there is another point as you refer to, Chair. The review was extremely helpful. I think it's always useful at this stage to get an independent and objective review of our plans, etc. I think there was quite a lot of assurance in there, but I think it also highlighted some important areas for us to attend to, clearly the most concerning, and I think it's not entirely unexpected, was the first recommendation, the red one. I think it's well documented that as an organisation that there is recognition that the recruitment pause, which commenced in August, will have had implications for priorities, and probably just to reassure members that best value absolutely is still a priority for the organisation. I had a meeting with the Chief Constable towards the end of the year, and to bring her up to speed with the responsibilities, and to give her a briefing on the best value proposals, and she absolutely recognised it as a proposal, as a priority, and I would not shy away from that. I think it's just that the priority at the time was to bring the organisation spending back in line with budget, and that was the key kind of organisational priority. So this is very much still on the cards. I recognise the point though about replanning, and that is really underway at the moment. I'm in talks with HR about how we can restart that, and I think there is an expectation that the recruitment pause will be lifted imminently, and we will make progress at that stage. I think that's all I would like to say. I mean, as you can see, all the points are accepted. I think they're all very helpful in guiding us as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. I mean, I think it's helpful to recognise that this is still being treated as a priority. From my point of view, it would have been perhaps sensible not to have included this within the freeze, given that we're talking about statutory responsibility that the Chief Constable has to fulfil, and it's a pity that that has caused a delay in recruiting the resource that you need, Alistair. But
sure,
if the freeze is about to be lifted, that would be fine. If not, then I think we would be looking to see whether or not an exception could be made for. I mean, these are matters for the Chief Constable. I'm clearly not trying to interfere in that, but
yeah.
It is important that we do make good progress, and you can do very much with next to no resource. So
well, that's
that would
right.
be good.
Yeah, and I absolutely recognise what you say, and we will make strong representations to move it forward if the freeze is not lifted. But I'm hopeful that it will be. Well,
yes, we all are. Thank you very much, Alistair. Paul, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, when will the freeze be lifted?
So I have no detail on that at the moment. I'm hopeful that towards the end of June, I think there's an SLB meeting, and I think it may be reviewed then, but it's not something that I've got an inside line on, I'm afraid, Paul.
Okay,
I don't
know because if it is a statutory responsibility, then we really need that to be back in line with the law as quickly as possible.
Yes.
Something I'm happy to pick up out with the meeting, if you like, Paul, so that we can get clarity on this. I don't know if Katie's still in the meeting with us, but I'm sure that it's not been missed, and will be picked up. But
because if anyone needs to obey the law, the police should be obeying it. So
yes.
to make up
and I do think that if we're still making a case for it, then we're a long way from having that resource in place. But I'd like to think that once you get the green light, we could get somebody or some resource in place as quickly as possible. So that's about expediting that end of the process as well. Alistair, you wanted to come back in?
Just very briefly, just to clarify something, if I may. I think the fact that this is not going ahead at the moment or hasn't made progress does not mean that we're not obeying the law. This is about assurance. Yeah, okay, you've got that.
Yes,
yeah, this is about assurance that we are in compliance, and it's all about the best controls, which I know is absolutely your interest.
It was a flippant point. I apologise for that. But...
No, not at all. Not at all. No, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that. That, unless anybody has anything else they want to ask about this particular report, that brings us to the end of item 3.1. So we're getting through the business quite quickly this morning. Item 3.2 is the annual internal audit report. So Claire, you're back on again, I'm afraid.
Yeah, so this report just summarises how the conclusions we've reached through the year, I guess, have built up into our overall conclusion for the year. And you'll see from reports previously discussed that in 4 of the 11 audits we undertook, we gave a kind of moderate or reasonable level of assurance. And in 5 of those areas, there were some limits on the assurance, either both design or operational effectiveness, or both, where we feel further work's needed to get a robust control environment in those areas. We've also made a comment on the overall status of the follow-up during the year, made some positive reflections on management's resolve to implement recommendations made overall. And there's further information on there on our adherence to our performance protocols and indicators, which were broadly on track, save for the off-cycle ARAC meeting that we had to have to just kind of make sure all those reports got finalised by this point in the year. There's also information on our subject matter expert usage included in here, and 4 of the audits had experts deployed in them, mainly around the data privacy, data analytics and digital kind of space for most of those. There's also information on here on our adherence to the budget. So that's it for this report.
Thank you, Claire. It's hard to believe a whole year has passed since you started doing these audits for us, and there's clearly in here a very helpful summary of all of the work that's been done. Do members want to come in and ask any questions of Claire? Make any comments? Claire, I wonder if you could reflect on that first full year of auditing the SP in Police Scotland, and if you wanted to make any comment on the themes that have emerged from that year.
I think Hazel actually previously in the meeting hit on one of the themes. I think it's like we're finding a lot of like legacy versus modern practice kind of issues, particularly around some of the systems in use. That's definitely a theme that's coming out. And one thing that's kind of came out quite strongly is, I guess, capacity and capability to cope with and drive forward change has been something that we've kind of noted in a number of different areas, some of which are recommendations we've inherited from before that when we're following up, we're finding themes, and some of it's from work we've done on things like best value and the previous project management type reviews. But we'll have opportunity within this year to get a bit deeper into some of those areas and understand more about the control environment and where we can contribute to continuous improvement in those areas.
I think we're all nodding in agreement with you. The whole issue of capacity and legacy arrangements is clearly still with us. So thank you very much for your report, Claire. If nobody has any further comments or questions, we can move on. I think are you finished now, Claire, or are you staying with us?
I'll stay with you, but I'm finished talking, I think.
Thank you. Get a cup of tea now, perhaps. So item 3.3 is the external audit progress and sector update report, and I think we have Rebecca Listra with us from Grant Thornton. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. So good morning, everyone. So today we're presenting to you our interim audit progress report and sector update. So I'll take the report as read and highlight some of the key areas from our work and our findings to date. So on page 4 of our report, this really just outlines the 23-24 deliverables. And as it stands, we are on track to deliver the annual audit opinion and our annual audit report by the end of September 2024. Moving on to pages 6 to 10, that outlines the work that we've performed to date and our status and findings of that work. There are a couple of areas that I'd like to draw your attention to. So on page 6, we issued planning inquiries to management, which essentially informs our risk assessment process. And these are updated for the full financial year post the 31st of March. And at the time of drafting this report, we'd received responses from SPA management and the chair of this committee here. However, we hadn't yet received responses from management of Police Scotland before finalising this report. To update members that we have now obtained those responses from Police Scotland management and have been able to close down our work in this area with no issues. At the bottom of page 6, we also conduct a number of walkthroughs to identify whether key controls are operating as expected. There are a number of areas where this process doesn't happen until the year end, and that includes areas such as property, plant and equipment and pension valuations. Therefore, just to make members aware that this work is still ongoing and will be finalised during our year-end audit work, which is normal for us, and it's really due to the timing of when those valuations take place. Moving on to page 7 of the report, we also performed some work over the IT general controls for key systems that feed into the financial statements, and one of those being the fixed asset register, which provides the outputs for property, plant and equipment. During our review of this system, we identified that one of the finance team members had super user access, which we don't normally expect and would really only expect members of IT or someone separate to the financial statement or the financial reporting process to have super user access. So this was flagged with Police Scotland and the IT department, who have now removed super user access from that individual. We haven't identified any inappropriate postings from that individual. However, we do note the control weakness as a finding due to the risk that this could have caused. However, we are satisfied that this has now been appropriately rectified as well. And again, kind of goes alongside Claire's report on IT review of user access as well, and just performing those timely reviews. Moving on to page 9 of the report. So we performed testing over a sample of IT assets to gain assurance whether or not they exist. From our sample, we identified one asset which was disposed of in 2022 but hadn't been written out of the fixed asset register. This is currently with management to investigate why it hadn't been written off on a timely basis. And once we get that understanding back, that will allow us to identify whether this is a one-off instance or whether there is a potential weakness in controls that we need to do more work in testing over. So we will provide a further update on conclusion of this work as part of the annual audit report, but at the moment that's under management investigation. Another area that we tested was around pension lump sums. So this is a little bit different, as the Scottish Public Pensions Authority hold all the information on behalf of SPA and Police Scotland in relation to pension lump sums and calculations. And essentially, they give the figure over to SPA and Police Scotland to put in the accounts each year. However, to get assurance over this figure, we need to test the underlying calculations to ensure that the value stated in the accounts is accurate. So last year we did experience some delays in obtaining this information. So we met with Police Scotland and SPA and SPP to put actions in place during the year to try and mitigate any delays forming again this year. One of those measures that we put in place was to bring forward our testing from year end and test the first 9 months. So we made sure that we provided SPPA enough time to provide the relevant information. However, unfortunately, we did still experience some delays. Some of that was in part due to an error in the information that was passed over to Police Scotland, which did take some time to resolve. But there also was just a general timeliness in the delay of responses to obtain evidence from SPPA. We now have the required information. However, we are just flagging this as a risk, as we do need to test the last 3 months at year end, and any similar delays could have a knock-on impact at the audit timetable, as we do place reliance on SPPA to provide us with that audit information. So some of the things we're doing to mitigate this risk. So we've obviously communicated this to SPPA. We've worked with SPA and Police Scotland colleagues on the issues identified with the receipt of information from SPPA. We are prioritising this work as part of the year-end audit to try and give SPPA as much time as possible to provide the required information. And given now that we've tested the first 9 months, our sample requirements for the last 3 months shouldn't be as extensive. We did also meet with Audit Scotland earlier in the year, who audit SPPA, to try and identify any efficiencies we could make by placing reliance on their work performed and any support to get the required information from SPPA as well. So we do believe that we can still meet the year-end audit deadline if we manage these risks and mitigations appropriately. And we understand that SPA and Police Scotland are supporting us with this, but we are just flagging this for members' attention. And then finally, just to update members that we delivered a training session in March to those that are part of the year-end and financial statement preparation, as there are a number of different individuals from different departments involved in providing required information to audit and finance. And this was essentially just to outline the role of audit, what we do and what we look for, what we expect in good practice working papers and good quality evidence as well, so that we can ensure a smooth and efficient audit process at year end. And then finally, page 11 onwards just really provides a number of publications which are there for members' information. So I'm happy to stop there and take any questions that any members may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. This is another very useful report and generally pretty positive, other than on the SPPA issue, which we might come back to. Can I ask Angelo if you want to come back in on behalf of Police Scotland?
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to come in and just first of all offer thanks to the external auditors for continuing to work really well with us here at SPA and Police Scotland. I think we are continuing to kind of where we left off actually from last year in terms of the high level of communication and really close working, and I think that shows here in the progress report. Just to provide a little bit more context on some of the sort of amber elements of the audit testing work plan tracker. So yeah, there was a bit of delay actually in getting the Police Scotland management sign off of the audit risk inquiries, but that was kind of by design actually. We'd held off to try and capture some of the information that we were gathering as part of the certificate of assurance process, which was sort of concluding right around about the time we were hoping to sign that off. So that was the reason for that slight delay there, but it was, I think, for good reason, and as confirmed by Rebecca, it's all been closed off as at now, and just in time for this particular committee. Similarly, the super user within Asset 4000, that's a bit of a legacy issue whereby the individual in question was previously the system administrator way back in 2019 prior to the finance reorganisation, at which time like segregation of duties kicked in and the responsibility was handed off to the newly formed finance systems team. So that's a little bit of context on that. It should have been picked up and removed sooner. It has now since been sorted. In terms of the IT asset that should have been disposed of was disposed of in 2022 but wasn't removed from the asset register, this was a particular asset that finance hadn't have been informed of at that point in time, otherwise it would have been removed. And actually we've decided as a result of this to tighten up our processes a little bit. So generally what we would do is we would review the nil book value assets every 3 years, but now going forward we're going to be reviewing it every year. So that new and enhanced control, if you like, would have picked this up at year end, and therefore that asset would have been removed or by now essentially would have been removed as at the 31st of March. In terms of the SPPA issues, I think Rebecca's sort of highlighted what they were rather clearly and eloquently, and we are doing all we can in terms of trying to mitigate those risks in terms of upfronting the work at year end, and obviously covering a majority of the testing as at interim. So that I think that will help mitigate any risk from an audit perspective. But in terms of like a Police Scotland SPA perspective, we are communicating regularly actually on a number of different levels and issues with SPPA, following on from the letter that was actually issued by the Chief Executive around about this time last year. So yeah, that was just a little bit more context I wanted just to add to the report, but otherwise I would say it's a positive report, and I think we are very well placed after a very successful interim audit to have a really smooth year-end audit. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Angelo. That's really helpful. Paul?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the SPPA issue, because it's, from what you're saying, we had this problem last year. You've put in requests to, or a system to try and address this and try and get it finished off. That's now still not working properly this year. Okay, a little bit might be, at our end, but the vast majority is at the other end. I'm curious, a couple of things. Firstly, have they given you a reason why it's so difficult to get information out of them? Secondly, and particularly for Rebecca, because I'm assuming that you are the external auditor for a number of different public bodies. Is this unique to us, or are they all experiencing the same problem? And the third question I've got is there any issue with the accuracy of these lump sum payments when you do the audit? Are you seeing any problems with that?
Yes, I'm happy to come back on that, Paul. So in terms of, I suppose, whether or not this is unique to SPA. I think there is a little bit of a difference between other bodies that we audit in terms of pensions, because they don't have a body on their behalf doing their calculations. So if we're auditing the pension fund, they're the ones that are doing the calculations. The difference here is that SPPA are holding all of the information on behalf of SPA, and we audit SPA and not SPPA. So there is a bit, we have to go through data sharing agreements and things like that to be able to get that information, which we upfront agreed that with SPPA last year. And as I mentioned, we also met with Audit Scotland as well to make sure that we've got on board with them as they are the auditors of SPPA in terms of our remit of the work that we need to undertake. So that was all agreed up front. So there is a little bit of a difference, which is unique to SPA, in the fact that all the information is held by another body that we don't audit. But there hasn't necessarily been a resistance to give us that information. I don't think that is the reason why we've not been getting that. I think it's probably a resources issue, and it's just the timeliness of information. And I think some of this delay this year was, again, a little bit of part of that was there was an issue with an error in the information that was originally provided, and that took a bit of time to resolve as well. So that is partfold of it as well. I know Angelo's got his hand up, so I'm happy to bring Angelo into that, and then I'll come back on your second point, Paul.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, just to add to that, from communications and discussions we've been having with SPPA, they have a new CFO in place, so he's been trying to get up to speed. He's actually been very helpful, to be honest with you, but I think he's sort of walked into a really difficult situation because there's been an exceptionally high level of turnover at SPPA as well, and that's obviously resulted in not only the issues that we're here discussing with in relation specifically to the lump sum testing within the audit, but we are reliant on a whole host of information coming through specific to the production of the annual report and accounts, and it's fair to say that the quality and the timeliness of the provision of that information has probably been the poorest ever. Schedules missing, problems within the schedules, having to go back and do a lot of hand holding, having to provide information in terms of this is what we've seen last year, can you give us it again in a similar format, etc. So it has actually caused quite a bit of additional work and delay from a Police Scotland SPA perspective in terms of actually producing the annual report and accounts. And it's kind of got to the stage actually that we stressed the importance of this being raised within the certificate of assurance that comes from SPPA to SPA, in terms of highlighting the sort of issues that they're facing and what they're trying to do to resolve it, and what they have said in terms of what they've got in place to try and prevent this going forward, as they've sort of pointed us to their corporate plan, which is called Building a Better SPPA. So I think that tells you quite a lot, even from the title of the plan. And then they also have an annual business plan, which is sort of got a key focus on service improvement and the sort of prioritisation of pension remedy and such like. So I think they are aware of their issues. And they are actively trying to seek to resolve them. It's just that at this particular point, they seem as if they're in a state of flux. And I think we as Police Scotland SPA and also Grant Thornton as the auditors have certainly sort of fell foul to that and experienced that, unfortunately. I would just point to something else in terms of the second question you'd asked. I really do think the approach from Grant Thornton in terms of working closely with Audit Scotland, who are the SPP auditors, is a really clever approach, actually. And they had that engagement really early on in terms of a sort of two-pronged approach in terms of their approach towards SPP. So I think that's actually welcoming, and I think a really, really clever sort of idea in terms of leveraging each other's relationships with SPPA. And then in terms of I've already touched on the issue with accuracy from our perspective, but I think, Rebecca, you maybe want to touch on that in terms of some of the issues you've faced from an audit perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of that accuracy piece, so we obviously did our testing work last year, and all of that, actually, when we got the evidence through and tested that evidence, we didn't have an issue with the accuracy. This year there was, as I mentioned before, a bit of an issue with the listings that had been sent over, which meant there was delays in selecting our samples just because there had been an error in that information. eventually when we got that resolved, our team at the moment are working through, because it was provided quite late, our team are still working through the evidence that has been provided. So it's too early to kind of say in terms of giving you that assurance of the accuracy of the evidence that's been provided so far. And that will obviously come out in our annual audit report if there's any issues. So I think there's still work in progress with that, Paul, if I'm being completely honest.
Great. Thanks very much for that. And I'll keep my eyes peeled for that when it comes out.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you. I always feel sorry for them, but we don't want their internal difficulties to cause problems with us in terms of completing our annual report and accounts, for example. So hopefully all of your efforts will bear fruit and we'll get what we need when we need it. So good luck with that. So if we're comfortable then to move on from item 3.3, and thank you, by the way, Rebecca, for the sector updates. They're very useful, and we can refer to these as we go forward. So item 4.1, section 4 of the agenda relates to assurance reporting, and so we're back to Alistair for 4.1, which is the Police Scotland Best Value biannual update. Alistair.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think most of this we covered probably in response to the audit report. I mean, this is really just highlighting the impact, excuse me, the impact of the recruitment pause last year, and the departure of the one member of staff that I had working with me on a part-time basis at the end of the year. The main focus really since the start of this year has been on providing the documentation to our internal audit colleagues and to engagement with them throughout the audit. I think that's really all I wanted to say, just to bring you up to date. Perhaps just to reassure you that the planning is going ahead, and we do look to start recruitment very soon. There are the job descriptions and everything are there. It's really working with HR now to navigate that process, and as soon as the recruitment pause is lifted, we will make progress. And if it isn't, then we shall escalate that. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, I think we're very aware of the difficulties, and we've covered this already in the earlier part of the agenda. But for all sorts of reasons, it would be good to see progress here. Absolutely. And you're not going to be able to do that until you have some resource to support you, Alistair. So I'm not sure if it would help if the committee were to ask for something more concrete by the next meeting, some updated plan for how the Chief Constable will discharge her responsibilities in this area. I think we're very anxious to know that that is being given appropriate priority. Do any members have anything they want to say on this one? Okay, so I think
I'm happy to take action on that.
Yeah, that would be helpful, Alistair, if we could have something to the next meeting that tells us what's been happening in terms of the getting the resource and what the plans are now for discharging the responsibilities that come from statute.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. I'm going to suggest we skip over item 4.2 because I know Grant McRae has a specific interest in this item and he's not quite joined us yet. So if we can come back to item 4.2 and go first of all then to 4.3, the integrated assurance statement. And John, I think that's you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to highlight again that the purpose of this work really is to bring together all the different areas of assurance that exist within the authority in one kind of summary place. And the main aim of that is to provide an overall view and opinion on the level of assurances that you have that will inform our annual report and accounts, which we've just been talking about. So some of the key features of that, it takes a view of our 4 lines of defence. We've just talked about internal audit as one of our key areas of assurance, so I won't repeat any of that detail. But in particular, what I would say is that the report draws a spotlight on the first and second line of defence areas, which is some areas that you wouldn't typically see in ARAC, but are really important areas of assurance for yourself and part of our systems of internal controls. What I would particularly call out is a lot of the really good work and assurance that we get from Police Scotland's business assurance team under ACC Houston, as well as the equivalent quality team within forensic services. They do a lot of internal, not audit, but insurance type works and readiness reviews, which provide, you know, another level beyond our internal audit work, which we can rely on. The overall conclusions within the report, and similar to internal audit, we can only ever give a reasonable view of assurance. There are a number of areas of improvements which are highlighted, which we need to recognise. However, what we're concluding is at a strategic level, we're able to provide a reasonable level of assurance on our systems of internal controls. Well, we'll highlight some exceptions, and that will be our conclusion, which we're proposing to include in the annual report and accounts. That's all I was going to highlight, but happy to take questions, of course.
Okay, thank you, John. Any questions for John? I find this very useful for those of us who are not steeped in audit, just to remember lines of defence and how they all fit together and where all the assurance comes from and converges into this report is really, really helpful, actually. Because sometimes, you know, it's easy to think it's all about what the auditors say or it's all about what this committee, and it's not at all. It's, you know, it's on a day and daily basis. People are providing assurance about things that we can rely upon. So I find this a very useful report every year, and thank you for it. Anybody before we move on? Nope. Okay, thank you, John. Item 4.4 then is the SPA Corporate 2023-24 year-end report. And John, I think you're presenting this on behalf of Lynn.
Yes, I think Chris Brown would like to make some introductory comments.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yes, happy to do that. So, yeah, as you said, this is the summary of SPA corporate performance over the previous financial year. Members will be aware of the work that underpins this and what we've been trying to do over the course of the year. In terms of the headline, we have an 80% achievement rate in terms of the milestones that were in the service plan, of which there were nearly 500. I think we would consider 80% to represent a fairly successful year when you consider that the authority had a self-imposed recruitment freeze for 2 years, including all of the financial year in question. And if you were to drill underneath some of the milestones that are pushing to the right, by and large, there tends to be a dependency on other stakeholders, either in terms of their delivery of a particular piece of work or their participation in something that the SPA would like to do. Absolutely, there have been some other milestones that have gone to the right as a result of competing priorities and dealing with the fact that we ran quite light on resource for much of the year as well. I know the CEO would want me to thank publicly all the work that's gone into both delivering the work that the SPA has undertaken during the year and also in pulling together the service plan and monitoring that so fastidiously over the course of the year. So personally, I want to thank all the heads of service, and I know Amanda's got a very specific role in leading and coordinating that, and I see she's on the call now, ready to take any more detailed questions that you may have. So I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Yes, and I think the committee, before we get into throwing questions at Amanda, would want to thank the staff and the team at the SPA for the work that's been done to overtake 80% of the 495 milestones, which is a very significant number. So even keeping track of all of that must be difficult. But anyway, thank you very much for that. Does any member have any comment or question on this report? Can I ask the recruitment freeze, Chris? Is that something that's under review or is that continuing?
We've loosened our recruitment freeze, and there are just simply some critical roles that we have to backfill into just now, which we're in the process of trying to do.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, Chris. I interrupted you.
No, carry on. I finished, Mary.
No, I'm saying I'm very pleased to hear that, because I do think that any freeze that lasts for any longer than that is likely to be such a blunt instrument. It begins to be damaging. So I'm pleased to hear it's been unfrozen a bit, and that you're able to recruit some key people in those particular roles. I think that's really helpful. Do you want to add anything in the absence of questions being fired at you?
Thanks, Chair. The only thing I would say, given we've discussed the number of milestones we set ourselves for last financial year, we have reflected on that practice, and you'll see from the final slide, the forward look for year 2, that we have made an attempt to rationalise not our ambition, but how we describe what we are aiming to achieve over the year, both to make it easier for us to deliver and to respond to changes in priority or new areas of work over the year, but also to ensure that we're bringing the most appropriate updates and can highlight practice and exception to committee over the course of the year.
Thank you, Amanda. I mean, I particularly found page 3 of your report really, really interesting. The highlight of the various achievements in the financial year under the heading of communities, collaboration, resourcing our people and learning. I mean, these are significant achievements. It's a small team, but, you know, outperforms expectations, I think. So well done, everybody. And if you could pass that comment back to the Chief Executive, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next item then. Item 4.5 is the ARAC annual report. John, you pulled this together.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This really, I mean, a lot of the reports that we're seeing to this committee are year-end reports, a reflection on the last financial year. So this one is a requirement to reflect on the committee and its role as it's outlined in the Audit Committee Handbook from the Scottish Government. So effectively what we're talking about here is has the ARAC as an audit committee fulfilled the requirements the Scottish Government would expect of that? And we've went through that checklist, as you can see. And in particular, there were 2 gaps in the past, which we've now fully addressed. One of those was in relation to accounting policies, judgment and estimates, which is earlier in the agenda. And I know we've had to skip past that, but we'll come back to that. So we've concluded that the ARAC has effectively discharged its role for the last financial year and its terms of reference. The only last point I would comment on is we have this paper and the next paper, which is our committee effectiveness. And just to kind of compare and contrast the two, this report is really about confirming that we've discharged our role as an ARAC. And their next paper on committee effectiveness really focuses on how well we're achieving those roles, not just for ARAC, but also much wider than that for all of the committees and boards of the SPA. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Yeah, I mean, it's been a busy year, and you've captured all of the things that the committee has been involved in. We've had some lengthy agendas, and we've dealt with a large number of internal audit reports as well. So it's been a busy year, but I think at the end of the day, we are able to say that we've done what we should be doing as an audit committee, and we're doing what the handbook suggests we should be doing. So I think with that, we should give ourselves a very brief pat on the back before we move on to the next item. Unless anyone has any questions or comments they want to make on this. Nope. Okay then, so item 4.6, I think, is the evaluation of committee effectiveness. So how well have our committees been doing? Eleanor, this is your report.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be familiar with the annual process whereby you make an assessment, and we make an assessment of the overall committee effectiveness and contribution to our governance processes. It's an important strand of our overall evaluation and informs the annual report and accounts, offering assurance on the operation of all our committees, work across the committees and the overall operation of the authority's governance. I think this year it's a very positive picture, and there's a lot of improvements that have been tracked over the course of the year. The report does include quite a detailed assessment of the members' self-assessment process, which was done via an online questionnaire with quite detailed questions. In terms of positives, I would particularly note that members were very comfortable to report that on the areas that we wanted to focus on from the previous year's assessment, which were transparency, corporate support and coordination across committees, everybody is comfortable that there is an improvement in these areas. And I think that's quite encouraging to see. All the committees, excuse me, were content to report that they had, in their view, fully committed, fully delivered against their terms of reference in terms of operating effectively. They were very positive about transparency, improvements in transparency, improvements in reporting, and improvements in the kind of support that were available from corporate services. I think also there were some themes that emerged as areas for potential improvement where we'll be looking to build on that further into the year ahead. There's an improvement in the quality of reporting, but members were noting that they'd like to see further improvement in that area, further improvement in how we track actions to make sure that everything that is coming up before the committee is properly tracked and reported on. So I think there are a number of areas there for further improvement that we will take forward as officers in dialogue with yourselves, really, and any relevant partners to see what else can be done to build on that improvement and keep that trajectory growing. I think, Chris, you wanted to come in on this particular item.
Yes.
So can I?
Yes, thank you, Eleanor. Bring Chris in.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Eleanor, for that summary. I really appreciate that. I just wanted to build on two of the things that Eleanor's saying. So obviously this is a really positive picture if we kind of look at the outcome of the self-assessment, but that doesn't mean that there's nothing to work on and improve, as Eleanor alluded to. I think in addition to what's already in the report, some of you as members will already be familiar with some of the live conversations that we're continuing to have around some other specific areas that we really want to lean into over the next year, and I think it's important to recognise that. So the ones I would probably want to pull out would be report volumes and length in committees. I think that's something that we really want to kind of push hard on this year in terms of improving quality, shortening length, and also just looking at whether the agendas that we have for some of these meetings, some of which are quite lengthy, are really supporting the terms of reference for each of these committee meetings. So we're not going to lose sight of that, I think, just because we get a positive score, which is obviously something to celebrate as well. I think finally, one of the other areas that I've just picked up on in conversation over the last little while is really pushing hard on delivery of actions. And that's something that I know that we'll, through all of the work of the committees and through the governance support officers, we really want to kind of get across as much as possible for the next year as well. So it was not to be glass half empty by any means. It's just as part of our kind of continuous improvement mindset, which I hope we've got. A positive outcome for this particular report doesn't mean that there aren't a whole bunch of things that we really want to lean into over the coming year, I think. So I just wanted to make that point, Mary. So thanks.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. That's really helpful. I think we are on a trajectory of improvement. I think that's clear. When I think back to a couple of years ago when we started this process and where we are now, so it's been a good exercise, but we do know there are more improvements, and I assume that we expect to get the HMICS report on our best value preparedness quite soon, our self-evaluation, and that would presumably give us some further hints as to what they think as well about where our committees are at.
Yeah, I think so, and hopefully there'll be some continuity across that report and what we're seeing today and what I've just said. So we'll be able to kind of pull all these, so we won't lack an evidence base for the areas that we really need to go after, when it comes to committee business, for example. So yeah, absolutely, we'll make sure we do that.
Okay, that's really helpful. Anybody got anything further they want to contribute to this? If not, we're at the end of item 4, and we only have one more item before the end of the public business, but we should go back to item 4.3. Grant hasn't been able to join us, so I know he'll be disappointed to miss this discussion, but it's important that we look at is it 4.2 rather, accounting policies, judgments and estimates. So John, I think this is between you and Angelo.
Yes, thanks again, Mary. This is a new paper, as I've mentioned, for ARAC. So this first of all, came about as part of our workshop session where we were doing that evaluation against the Audit Committee handbook. So it's best practice to have a paper like this every year, which looks at our accounting policies, judgment and estimates. And it's the first time that we're seeing this within the SPA. So in effect, why are we doing this? Well, the accounting policies are basically the decisions on what accounting policies we're going to apply, so that when Police Scotland and the SPA are preparing the annual report and accounts, we know the rules and the decisions that we've made that we will take when we're preparing those accounts. So in effect, we're asking for your decision on these policies before we complete the detailed accounts. And when we look into the report itself, for accounting policies, we're not actually proposing any changes to the accounting policies from previous years, first of all. Looking at significant judgments and estimates, there are a few key ones in there, and in fact, they really echo what's come from the external auditor's plan that you've seen in the past and updated earlier in this agenda. So really, that's all I was going to mention at this stage. This is good practice, and we're looking for the ARAC to endorse what's proposed in front of you. You will see the draft annual report and accounts come later in the year, both in draft and then the final report in September, where you'll see these being applied.
Okay, thank you, John. Angelo, did you want to add anything?
Thanks, Chair. No, I was actually going to just sort of echo what John has already pointed out. It's a sort of new paper, but I do think it's helpful because it does allow committee consideration prior to the draft, and it gives you guys an opportunity to read, review and influence, which previously you would be restricted in doing given your involvement sort of much later in the day. But what John said is accurate. The accounting policies as well as the judgment and estimates are consistent with prior year, as you would expect for the most part, because that allows the comparison between the 2 years, which is obviously really, really crucial and when it comes to the annual report and accounts. But yeah, they're there for your consideration and thoughts. And yeah, we'll be bringing this paper in the future, and you'll see these again another twice in the draft annual report and accounts in August, and then again in the final ones in September. So this isn't the final opportunity, but it's the first time you've had that sort of initial sight of them. But yeah, nothing further really to add to what John's already said, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I think we picked up this gap in our last ARAC development day, so it's good to know that it's here already, so that's helpful. John, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I know that Grant McRae can't make it to the meeting just now. He has been able to communicate to me the particular question that he would like to have raised. With your approval, I can read out what he would like to ask, if that's something that you would want to endorse.
Thank you.
I can attempt to answer it.
Please contact reception.
Apologies for that. So Mr. McRae was asking, in particular, because there's quite a lot of changes within the Police Scotland estate. We're aware of the estate strategy and a number of disposals which are continuing to go on. He'd like to know how we're accounting for that situation where we maybe have a police building which is either no longer in use, is being declared surplus, or we're trying to sell that. How do we make sure within our accounting policies that we're correctly recording the value of that building at the year end because of all the changes that are going on within the Police Scotland estate?
Yeah,
good
thanks,
question,
John.
Grant.
It is a good question from Grant. Wouldn't expect any less. So I suppose it comes down to a few different things in terms of so when would we essentially declare an asset surplus or an asset is held for sale, and it really comes down to the sort of definition within the accounting standards as to when it achieves those statuses. So really, for an asset to be held for sale, it must be immediately available for sale, and it's sort of in the condition that it exists in, and there should be a committed plan to actually actively market the sale, and the sale should be highly probable within the next 12 months. It can be sort of extended, but generally that needs to be as a result of circumstances that are sort of out with our control, if you like. And the sort of key difference between an asset being held for sale and an asset being surplus is the lack of active marketing. And in terms of when it would then kind of, if you like, become formal, it needs to go through board approval. So once you've met all those criteria, there would then be a report that would come forth possibly from estates to say, yep, these are assets that have either been identified as surplus or held for sale, and then the papers would obviously detail the reasons why that may be the case. For example, no longer of use from an operational perspective. then the board would either approve or not. And then at that point in time, it then becomes an asset held for sale, and essentially at that point it's immediately revalued as such, and then that flows through into the accounts at that particular value. In terms of the valuation method, assets held for sale tend to be measured at the lower of fair value or market value, less cost, with fair value sort of being that intrinsic worth of an asset, like considering factors like growth potential or replacement cost, whereas market value is just what the market's sort of willing to pay for the asset at that particular time, so it's therefore sort of influenced by supply and demand, whereas fair value is sort of independent from that, if you like. And generally, once a valuation takes place upon the classification of asset held for sale and it's added to the fixed asset register, the accounting standards prevents us from then valuing it up. It can only be valued down for some reason. I actually don't understand the context as to why that is. I probably need to go away and do some research on that again, but it can only be revalued down from that point. So that's kind of how, if you like, it would be, why it would be classified as such, how it could go about being classified as such, how it would be valued. And then I suppose if those decisions were to take place beyond, like in terms of how would that flow into the annual report and accounts, if the board approval and the valuation had taken place prior to the 31st of March, it would be captured and added to the accounts as such, under the appropriate valuation method. If it happened beyond the year end, then it may fall into the sort of realms of post balance sheet consideration. If it happened between the 1st of April and the point in which we sign the accounts and have you as the Audit Risk and Assurance Committee and the board approve them, but it would need to be quite material as such for it to feature in the accounts. If not, it would be sort of not necessarily deemed as important as such enough for it to be called out separately, given it's happened beyond the end of the balance sheet date, if you like. So I don't really know if that specifically answers the question, John, but I can see you get your hand up, so possibly not. I'll let you come back in.
John, do you want to come back in?
Oh, thanks. That's very technical from Angelo. I suppose the key thing for ARAC that I would highlight is in the accounting policies at 1.5, we've got that specific accounting policy summarised from what Angelo was just saying there on how we value our property, plant and equipment. So effectively at that year end date, we will see at what position they're in, what the status of those is, if we're actively marking it, if it's surplus. And the policy outlines, well, depending on where we are in that process, we'll make sure it's valued appropriately and valued by an external valuer. So I think that can give yourselves and grant particular comfort that the valuation of all of our assets, particularly PPE at the end of the year, is correct, or as accurate as we can make it with all the assumptions that you come with valuation of buildings.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think if somebody can make sure Grant has a response to his question, and just a quick call to him, I'm sure would resolve that. So that would be helpful. I had one question about this, which is kind of a legacy issue for me, because dating back to my days on the legal committee, I remember lots of discussions about the difference between the budget and the provisions that were being made for possible settlements, and sometimes quite a significant difference. So I just wondered if we could bring me up to date really on how we ensure that accurate provisions are obtained for legal settlements.
Yeah, I can certainly have a go at answering that one, Chair. So yeah, there's actually been a lot of work done between finance and legal in this exact space. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, Audit Scotland had sort of indicated a bit of a weakness in this particular area, and there's certainly been a lot of activity since then. And I don't think we're all the way there, but we're certainly in a very progressed state. But to answer your specific question, the sort of budget and how that flows through into what's then provided for, and how that also influences the contingent liability and the provision within the accounts is quite a complex sort of set of circumstances. But generally, when budget setting's taking place, the budget holder, if you like, will say, based on my understanding of these cases and how much I think that maybe we may be on the hook for, I think we require X amount of money. But that doesn't necessarily cover all, because we know for a fact there's going to be delays, there's going to be instances where we do better, there's going to be instances where we do worse in terms of the outcome of particular legal proceedings. And it's as a result of that complexity, we've sometimes struggled to map the two together from budget through forecast to the provision and the contingent liability. And that's where we've looked to really enhance, if you like, the controls and grip around this through the provision of a better legal register, which is what we presented at the recent SPA Legal Committee Away Day. And what that essentially tries to do is track that golden thread from budget through forecast throughout a financial year and into the provision and contingent liability as at the balance sheet date. And like I said, there's been lots of enhancements and additional controls added along the way. But essentially, what we do is say, as at the year-end position, we'll sit down with the claim handlers and we'll say, here's the list of all the existing legal claims. What do you think the probability of that translating into a payment will be? And that's the key differentiator between what the legal reserve is and what the provision in accordance to the standards is, and also the residual contingent liability. And that was the key control issue that Audit Scotland had called out. And that is all captured in that register now. And that we've, like I say, we've got really good, strong ongoing collaboration with legal in terms of really nailing that and getting that as accurate as it possibly can be. And as something I know that our external auditors who are still on the call have a real active interest on, and no doubt that will feature as part of the year-end audit as well.
Okay, thank you, Angela. That's really helpful and shows quite how much work has been done on this since my days. So that's really good to know. John, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Chair. This has always been quite a tricky area for us. There's probably half a dozen areas where budgeting rules and accounting rules are different for year end. So when we're talking about legal here, what Scottish Government requires for their own budget monitoring is slightly different in terms of the year-end financial accounting rules. So we're talking here about our annual report and accounts, which have to follow a very specific set of accounting requirements. And it just so happens that for provisions and legal provisions, they're different from how Scottish Government sets those rules. And that's a problem we're never going to get over. We have got two slightly different areas of rules, but what we can provide you with assurances here is when we get to the year end, we're correctly recording our legal liabilities. The challenge always for moving forward is to try and explain in as simple as possible why sometimes the budget setting for legal is going to look a bit different from the year-end provision. And that's the challenge that we're trying to get over just for legal committee reporting. And that's what Angela's been trying to show the committee going forward. But again, for accounting policies, what we have in here meets the requirement of the Treasury accounting rules for the year end. That's the key point.
Thank you very much. I mean, it's a complex area, but I'm very content with those explanations. So thank you. That brings us, I think, unless anybody has anything else, to the end of item 4 or section 4 of the agenda. We have one more item in public, which is the committee work plan, and ask if members are content to approve that. Yep. Thank you very much. We'll keep that updated. Looks like we've got a busy spell ahead. Now, if we're closing the public business, we'll be, I think, suggesting a 10-minute comfort break at this stage. I think we can probably get through the rest of the business before we need to break for lunch. So I think we can take a 10-minute comfort break. We'll close the live stream and I'll see you back here at 10 to 12. Is that okay? Okay, thank you very much. Bye.